This happened shortly after moving to Florida. I'm originally from Texas. The idea of moving to this place I had only heard was for alligators and the elderly as well was less than imaginable. At the time, I was 20 years old, 5'3" and around 160 pounds with my stocky, bright-eyed, 1.5-year-old son tagging at my heels wherever I went. I was never the type to just stay home all day and laze around. We were always on the move and having our own little adventures. This being said, I wasn't stupid. Small youngin' with a baby and all by myself was not a very good combination for a girl who had just moved into a large city. My parents were almost always eager to open my eyes at how people could be outside of our small, tired town. I wasn't naive. At any given time I had a pocket knife, mace, or in some cases my concealed carry pistol. Call me paranoid or whatever, but I'll do anything to keep me, and especially my son, safe. Anyway, every so often, I would look up a nice park to take a trip to. I loved walking to the nature trails with my jogger stroller, and my son seemed to enjoy it too. On this particular Saturday morning, I found a park relatively close to our home, just a few miles away with nice trails and even a toddler's playground. We bundled up and headed out. Driving into the park, it was smaller than I expected. I had assumed more people would be there already given the hour. A few cars littered the parking lot with a large tan van, straight out of the 90s, that stood out to me. Okay, no big deal. I surveyed a little more and noticed an elderly man that looked like maybe a granddaughter with him. I couldn't very well see her as she was sitting on the opposite side of the typical park table. I grabbed the stroller, my hiking bag, and headed for the trail according to the tracker on my phone. A few yards in, I caught up to another mother walking with what seemed like two preteens and a younger child. She was nice and we shared some small talk along the way. When I heard some noise behind us and realized the couple sitting at the table was about a yard behind us. Seemed this trail was popular. Halfway through our walk, my son started to get fussy, as I could tell he had probably dropped his sippy cup and couldn't reach it. I said goodbyes to our walking buddies and pulled the stroller off to the side. I helped my son reach his cup and grabbed him a snack, then reached into my bag to grab my water bottle and check the tracker. Soon, I had noticed the couple reaching our part of the trail, but they were taking their slow pace. Which was odd. Seems like they were slowing down the closer they got to me. I looked back down at the stroller to make sure I wasn't blocking their path. Nope, plenty of room. Looking back, they were much closer. Like a few feet closer. Too close for my comfort, if I'm honest. I put my water back and put my hands on the stroller handle, turning around to head back into the trailhead. I started walking, only to have the two stop dead in their tracks in front of me. I could finally see them clearly. An older man with a dirty face but clean shaved, long gray hair, and a flannel shirt. The woman, I could now tell, looked around her mid-30s. She was wearing lipstick and had dyed blonde hair. They made the air feel funny and the hairs on my neck tingled. I smiled in a get the hell out of my way fashion and said, "Excuse me." The woman smiled with her teeth were dirty. "Oh, sorry, are we in your way?" Her response cracked in her voice. The guy moved slightly from the woman's side, a half-crooked smile now painted on his face as he looked over to her. Screw this. I chose to off-road it. I pulled the stroller as far as I could off the side without getting stuck as I quickly and swiftly moved past these people. Only 2 steps passed and I just started running. Only 4 steps after that do I hear rustling happening behind me. A quick glance told me they had the same idea that were to brisk jog behind me. My eyes shifted forward, focusing on the trail as I reached into the stroller's handle cup and placed my hand on my tactical knife. Only a couple more yards until the trailhead. I didn't slow down until I reached asphalt. I was back in the parking lot and my run slowed to a jog as a familiar face peeked out from the back of her minivan. I had never been so happy to see a stranger. I redirected my path to her and waved, which in turn made the dynamic duo slow and redirect their path away from me. She smiled and waved at me a quick, "Hope you have a good day, see you later," and that was the end of our conversation. My heart sank as I looked at my car, only to be met with the same pair sitting at the park bench right between me and my car. Crap. Last resort, I reached for my phone with a slight surprise in my face, unlocked it, and called my mom. Hey, Jess. Hey, Mom, how many people are coming for dinner tonight? A slight pause. What do you mean? Are you okay? No. How many people will be coming for dinner? 4, including me and your dad. Where are you? I was so happy that she knew what I was doing and played along to give me the answers. I was now near the park bench and I hoped my conversation with my mom was heard and possibly would be a deterrent. Oh, okay, 6 people. I'm at such and such park. I should be home in 15 minutes. I got it. Do you need me to call someone? I could hear her relay things to my dad as he asked questions too. No, I'm getting in my car. We'll just get it when I get home so you can go with me. At this point, I had finally made it to my car, keys in hand. I quickly buckled up my son, popped the stroller on the back, and jumped in my seat, all while those strangers' eager eyes never left me. I wasn't even thinking of how fast I was going at the time. I reached the main road in probably a record time, and frankly, I didn't care. I explained everything to my mom, who took fair time to calm me down as well. She was worried about them following me, so I drove around for a bit before going home. Suddenly, the gated community I opted for when moving here seems like the best decision I've made in a while. I hugged my son extra tight at bedtime and talked to my mom a little longer than normal. Just to preface the story, it is 100% true, and I would try to be as detailed as possible as this happened about 8 years ago. To give some background, I am a 5 foot 10 inch tall, 245-pound football player. So on with the story. This encounter happened on the North Canadian River off of I-40 in Oklahoma in the early spring of 2011. To describe the location, the part of the river we camped at was at the bridge on a county road that allowed access via narrow and steep pass down the river. At this time of year, the river was very low, and you could walk across the sandbars in the river in some of the places. My friend Gabe and I lived roughly 5 miles apart, and in between our houses was the North Canadian River. So we probably had some comfort or self-confidence in the fact that home was just a few short-minute drive away. We had decided, while we were in school, that day to camp down at the river. So he came after school, and we packed up my Mazda Miata with a few things we would need to spend the night. In this list of things was a few cheap blue tarps, some blankets, sleeping bags, an axe, and my trusty hunting knife. We arrived at about 5 in the afternoon, so we had a few hours of light left to set up camp, which mostly went off without a hitch. I parked a car at the road and we packed our gear down the steep pass and a couple 100 yards down the riverbank. The river seemed normal and did not seem anything overly concerning, just driftwood and some bullet casings and empty shotgun shells. This type of thing was typical as people often fire their shotgun at the river. So this didn't set off any alarms. It had just started to get dark and I had gathered up a vast amount of firewood, and Gabe had gotten the tarp laid over the sand. The forecast, but for clear skies, and we look forward to a fun night shooting the shit and playing with the campfire. Unfortunately, while we were setting up our camp, I ended up slicing the top of my hand with the hunting knife, which was just a slight hindrance, and I did what any high school kid would do. I ripped off a sleeve and covered my wound. Right before dark, we saw a mid-sized red pickup truck pull down the small side river on the road opposite side of us. It was a mid-sized pickup truck. It was interesting. I was driving slowly on the opposite side about 400 to 500 yards. We could hear them talking loudly, but we shortly could not hear what they were doing. Eventually, we could see them coming back over. Without the truck this time, they had fishing rods. So that put us even more at ease. Our primary concern being that they would start firing guns at us before seeing us there. Most of the night goes off without a hitch, and it had started to get a little chilly, so we ended up starting another fire above us on the bank of the river. So we know we had our little pallet set up on the bank of the floor and a fire on the side of us. We were just setting up and settling down for the night and about to fall asleep when we hear several of the men who had been nosily fishing up the river no longer there. We found this a bit odd and started looking in their direction, assuming at this point it was about 11 at night and pitch black with a very thin crescent moon. Assuming they were leaving, we were a little surprised to see a headlamp bobbing in our direction. We both perked up a little bit at this, but stayed fairly calm and didn't move. We were close enough to our fires to be fully safe and illuminated, but our fires only lit up about 20 feet radius around us. Laying on our backs, still eyeing the light moving in our direction, but still opposite side of the river, we see the light suddenly go out. We both noticeably tense up and look around a second for the light, wondering where the man had gone to. But after a couple of minutes we relaxed there, and we were still kind of creeped out, but we tried to shrug it off as something weird. Then before I know it, out of my peripheral vision, I see movement, and quickly sit up before really thinking I let out a hey, and the guy had I grabbed my knife that was next to me. To my left is a middle-aged man with a scruffy beard and coveralls. I'm not sure if it was the slight sound of the river that muffled his footsteps that made me unaware of his approach or the fact that he had turned off his headlamp to make his way over to us. But I was a little unnerved. His angle of approach was even more alarming. It was almost as if he wanted to come right up behind me. So, here's his two 17-year-old high school students with a rough-looking 40-year-old something man that just tried to sneak up on us. After my initial hey, and me being the bigger of the two of us, he says hello back and takes one more step towards us before he stops. I'm thinking he must have seen the knife I was holding on the opposite side of myself, because he raised his hands a little and apologized for sneaking up on us. He explains that he didn't want to disturb us if we were asleep. Gabe and I get this sick feeling in our stomach. I ask why he turned his headlamp off halfway over to us, and he tells me the battery died. He stays put in his place with a disappointed look on his face and asks us if we have a doobie we would sell him. We polite him, tell him no, then he turns on his headlamp and he walks back to his fishing buddies about 30 minutes away. After a while, we hear them packing up and we see their truck headlights turn on and leave. I'm not sure if the men had any intentions worse than getting high that night, for I believe he did, and I'm not sure if it was to rob us or kill us or some deliverance type stuff. But either way, I don't think they were good. Situations like this have made me overly paranoid at times, but at least I am even more hyper-vigilant of my surroundings. Years on years ago, in the early 2000s, I was at a summer camp as a counselor in upstate New York, Camp Olmsted. It was a sleepaway camp and we took care of kids there from like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. The activities of the day were split into roughly 50-minute blocks, all except for one. This activity was about 2 hours put together, and it had happened about once or twice a week. It was the Storm King mountain climb. Now, it wasn't a grab a rock and climb style mountain. It was a walk a path for a little while, yay, you're climbing a mountain style mountain. Anyway, 2 hours was never enough time to get to the top, and we always had to turn back at the hour and change mark. You try taking a bunch of inner city kids on a hike and see how far you can go before they start wheezing and screaming bloody murder. Anyway, this particular day, I had some free time after the climb, so I told my partner to take the kids back down. I was going to continue the rest of the climb by myself. I'd be back in an hour. This had always been the plan. So I had the groundskeeper assistant, who was around my age, we were about 19, come with me so I could have a climbing buddy. Anyway, 45 minutes later, we had made it to the top. We kind of lost track of the path a long way, but we made it. That was all that mattered. I actually saw a bald eagle flying over and saw some town that was crazy far away. It freaked me out how high we were. but the view made it all worth it. Anyway, it was time to get down. We didn't remember which way we came, so we just went in the general direction we felt we came, until we saw the path again. Needless to say, we never saw the path. Of course, our 19-year-old minds figured if we kept going down, we'll eventually get off the mountain. Well, it turns out shit gets real once you get off the path. Thorns everywhere, animals wandering around. At some point, gnats just started swarming around our heads and refused to leave. And turns out, our plan had some kinks. You see, after a while, the hills became very steep, and we resorted to sliding on our butts as a method of travel. Walking just became too dangerous. We nearly fell and tumbled quite a few times. Anyway, I started doing some last action hero slide. I was going way too fast. At the last minute, I grabbed a mini tree before I went off over the horizon. We went towards it because we thought it was yet another steep hill. And we were right. A 90-degree angle steep, I nearly fell off in what looked like a 5-story drop. It was probably 5 stories to the treetops. Who knows how far it actually was? So my buddy's freaking out for some reason. I can't explain. I wasn't even scared. I was more worried that we were late as hell, and we were going to get in trouble. I'm going to get fired. I didn't want to get fired because I love this job. I was basically getting paid to play with the kids, and I liked all my coworkers. At this point, we were about 20 to 30 minutes late, and I was banking on the head counselor not noticing. I planned on just casually walking back to my group and acting like nothing was wrong. My buddy, on the other hand, was upset because he watches Toonami, and today Frieza certified Goku. He thought this might have been the episode where he goes Super Saiyan. He was obviously freaking out, and that was the cut and dry gallows humor part of it. Anyway, after much butt sliding, dead ends, and improvising, we finally saw a road. We celebrated, got on it, and began randomly walking in a direction. Eventually, on a bike, some stereotypical biker-looking dude with an American flag bandana, leather jacket, shades, blonde facial hair, and a girl in the back drove by. They looked about in their 40s. It was a long road, so I had more than enough time to flag them down. I asked him where Camp Olmsted was. He said it was about 2 miles in the direction we were going. We thanked him, continued on our way, and we had the bright idea to put the dirt in our hair, because maybe that would give us some sympathy points, and we wouldn't be fired. At this point, our clothes are beyond filthy. I had the bright idea to wear white clothes that day. We have gnats swarming around our hair, and now we have dirt in there as well. After some light jogging, we eventually make it back. The groundskeeper goes back to the post, and I creep back to my cabin and tell my partner the adventure. I ask him if the head counselor had asked about me, and he said nah, and I thought I got away with it scot-free. So as I began to recall the highlights of it, guess who appears? The counselor with a huge backpack complete with a grappling hook wrapped around his chest, literally a grappling hook. I've never in my life seen a grappling hook, and I still haven't to this day. Where the heck were you, son? He said sternly. It was a Christian summer camp, and I had never heard this guy use profanity before. My partner immediately disappeared out of the room. It was like he had no frames of animation. His upper body was just moving towards the door without movement. I got off lightly, though. Head counselor was a friend of the family. It was the main reason I got the job. The talk was mainly about how I made a stupid decision, and if I had died, he'd have to tell my family, and etc. At the end of the day, I wasn't fired, got to the top of the mountain, and had this awesome story to tell people. Earlier this summer, I sent you a story of mine that happened about 3 years ago during my senior year. This is an update on what happened. So, about 3 years ago, I went hiking by myself and stopped at a campground that not a lot of people travel to, mainly because it's a little over 10 miles into the mountains, and the trail is being consumed by forest each year. Well, anyways, when I got to the campground, there was that woman calling me into the forest, and then a little bit later, that screech happened. I told myself that I would never go back, but nearly 3 years later, I decided that I needed answers. So after the story was featured on your channel, I was looking through the comments, and someone said that the creature was likely a Wendigo or a Skinwalker. So I've been reading up about them, and I gathered the courage to go back to the location that my experience happened. This time, I brought a friend with me, and I came better equipped. So on October 13th, 2018, my friend and I started our trek through the windy path, overgrown brush and rocky trails to the small location by the small lake with the mountains. This time we made sure we got the location during the day. I packed a journal, a rifle, a handgun, and other items for hiking. When we got there, I gathered my bearings to the spot where the lady was calling me at. When I got there, I noticed there was a small trail that branched off from the spot that led into the forest. I've only known about one trail that we came in on, but that was supposed to be the only trail. And the weird thing about this trail is it didn't even have a connect to the site. It just randomly started in a forest. At noon, my friend and I followed the trail for about 3/4 of a mile that led into the small valley. With the forest being very thick and the trees covering most of the light, the farther we traveled into the forest, the darker it got. We finally walked around a hill, and reaching at the end of the trail was an old mine that had been caved in. I decided to get a closer look, so I turned my flashlight and pointed my handgun in the same direction. Every step I took towards the black abyss, my heart started to beat louder and faster to the point where my hand was shaking. Looking inside the mine was very dark and hard to see anything. The only thing I could see was a couple of barrels and then a steep incline that looked like it went on forever. But the sound of water dripping was the only noise I could hear coming from inside the mine, but the smell was something I'd never forget. It was an odor that I never wanted to smell again. It was the same odor from 3 years ago, before that thing showed up. I feel like we walked up to the creature's home, and there was no entrance because it was caved in. I quickly took a couple steps back, and my friends called my name and insisted we head back to our campsite. We make the walk back, and at this time, it started to get dark, and it's one of those chilly October nights with a little breeze and just a small amount of fog lingering over the lake. After hanging out for a couple of hours, my friends started to get a fire going with dinner, and I just watched the sun slowly disappear behind the mountains, and my stomach started to drop every minute we lost light, just worrying on what might happen tonight. We took shifts staying up and waiting for the creature to return. I took the first shift. I stayed up from 10 to midnight. After those 2 hours just scanning and staring at the location where the lady called for help, the only thing I really found was some elk across the pond. But other than that, nothing happened. Once my shift was up, my friend took over. I fell into a deep sleep when I was woken by a screech echoing through the mountains. I jumped up and reached for my rifle, and I looked at my friend, and the look of pure terror was on his face. It scared me, because I woke up thinking he saw the thing. He didn't, but he kept looking around trying to find the source, but it was hard to pinpoint with the echoing. I get up, and we waited for 15 minutes, not saying anything to each other, but just looking and waiting. My friend finally breaks the silence. "Did you hear that? The first time you were—" Then I was interrupted by a voice in the distance. It was a woman's voice, and this time, it called my name out. I don't know how it knew my name, but thinking about it, I bet it heard my friend call my name at the mine or something, but I just stood in shock. My friend looks over at me. "It knows your freaking name?" Then he turns as if he's gonna talk to it. I quickly grab his arm and whisper to him, "Don't say anything to it. We have to keep our cool." Right after that, I hear the noise coming to my left, where the trail is, and I shine the flashlight there. But my friend decides to take a shot in that direction, and turns out the creature wasn't even near the spot, because behind us, near the lake, on the side of the forest, I hear scraping, and branches and brushes moving away from us. Nothing else happened that night, but we stayed up until dawn, and then packed up our gear. Before leaving, I wanted to go out to the mine one last time. When I got there, something was different. A couple boulders that were keeping the mine closed fell off and leaving a tiny entrance that only somebody could squeeze through if they were small. I didn't want to get too close or even go into the mine, so I just kept my distance. I looked on the ground and found a print nothing like I've ever seen. Add a palm print of a large human but claw point of a bear. The prints were nothing like I'd ever seen in my life. Once I was done looking at the print, my friend and I headed back home. I came back and got my closure, though I would never go back to that location. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my experience.